Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Alan Barry Labacan from the rocksandstocksnews.com website. Another one of our CEO interviews. Today I have Brandon Macdonald from Fireweed Zinc. They just recently had some very high-grade results, but they also had some interesting stuff that I want to dig deeper into. So thank you very much for joining us today, Brandon.
Hey, happy to be here, man.
Why don't you start with the recent drill results? Give us a rundown.
Yeah, the summary is that last year we discovered an offset to the boundary zone, which we call Boundary West. This is kind of the center part of our property. That was pretty exciting, that discovery last year. And then this year we found that there's a new horizon within Boundary West that's mineralized that we didn't know existed. So these deposits can often be stratiform, so they're stuck in a layer of the stratigraphy. But so now we found a new layer of the stratigraphy is mineralized, and it was a pretty hot hole, right? So that new layer, 24% zinc, 3.5% lead, and 75 grams silver, just over 10 meters, right? So that's pretty smoking grade. Over reasonable thickness. True thickness will probably be about half that, but that's still pretty good. So we're happy, and that was a bonus. We weren't expecting to hit it. Then lower in the hole, hit the zone that we were actually aiming for, and that was 8% zinc and 50 grams silver over 61 meters. So that's a pretty healthy intersection too. So it was a pretty great hole. We're pretty happy with that.
That boundary zone is really what caught my attention when you guys initially made that discovery. That looked pretty exciting, and now you're expanding on that.
Yeah, and to clarify, it was kind of a rediscovery. I mean, the original holes in the boundary zone were by Kamenko back in the day, like in the 80s, and I don't want to claim that like it was a greenfields discovery that we were the first drill holes into it, because we weren't. But certainly we're Boundary West. That was a new discovery. But the main part of boundary zone that we call Boundary Main or just boundary zone, a couple holes in it. Well, more than a couple holes, but a dozen holes in it from Kamenko, and we kind of reinterpreted that, came in, proved up some better grades and widths, and have been following up on that, and it's pretty awesome, right? So 230 meters true thickness from surface of 4.5% zinc, and the first 100 meters from surface true thickness of nearly 8%, right? So it's like, when you're conceiving of kind of an open pit scenario, it's a pretty incredible endowment, right? So we're happy with how that's shaping up too.
So there's 6 holes. What did they find in it, Brandon?
Yeah, it's about a dozen, I think, but they were hitting similar widths, so 200 to 300 meters, anywhere between 2 to 3.5% zinc. So, on the lower end of that, it's, with zinc prices, it's hard to imagine that being a successful pit at those sort of grades. But the new grades we've been showing, kind of proving up that it's definitely clearing the threshold of what would make a successful pit. We're not, locally very, very high grade, like 6 meters of 42% zinc within that, but not so much continuity in the high grade, or at least some continuity, but not like the true stratiform layers that we see elsewhere. So it's great to kind of prove up a big pit for sure, right? Like that operational simplicity definitely comes with a nice pit.
And where was their drilling in relation to your drilling?
Their drilling was same area, like in the boundary zone area, and they actually over a 2.5 kilometer sort of strike length they were drilling and hitting, and sometimes good stuff, sometimes 10 meters of 10% zinc, right, which that's underground grade, that's great grade, but they didn't follow up on it, right? And look, you can't throw the Kamenko team under the bus on this, because when they were exploring this, the late 70s and 80s, they were also working on a little discovery called Red Dog. which, like
Kind
was,
of got their attention.
yeah, and that's what you find within majors, that if there's not a champion for the project, if it doesn't have their full attention, it just doesn't get done right. So you come into a junior, and for better for worse, juniors go aggressively after our projects, right? So it means that when a project's good, we're really on it. But it means sometimes when the project's bad, we refuse to give up, right? So that's the junior world is differentiating between the management who's just about got it there, and the management who's maybe beating a dead horse. But even they may not know, right? Like it's exploration's tough. It's tough business, right? A lot of luck.
Yeah, well, it's that's something I learned really early in my career, was that, somebody always has to be the champion. And that's not just in the exploration business. That also comes down to majors. They're all the geos are standing in line trying to impress the management that my project is the one you want to spend $1 to $5 million on, and here's why. And
Yeah.
so everything needs a champion. But what I'm trying to visualize, I mean, your results at Boundary were significantly better than Kaminko's work. Is it a different zone, part of the zone? Is it like, why is there that difference?
So the main part of Boundary, we got better results, in part because of luck, right? Like that was just, we hit a high grade zone that they had got sniffs of, but we kind of hit it full on. That was that 6 meters of 42% that I was talking about.
Right.
That helps, right? Like, and like to be frank about it, when we're talking about the 100 meters of 8% zinc from surface, that includes that. So that kind of gets smeared over that. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that that's what happens when you average, but the residual grade in the other 94 meters is like still 4% or something like that, which is
So
still,
that's open pit numbers, no problem.
yeah. So that's the key. Like, I think when you're trying to, the challenge for a CEO is you're trying to, the good reason why you smear is you're trying to conceptualize that, make the whole conceivable as a single number, right? Like you're trying to like make it easy to understand. The downside of smearing is that when you're smearing across intervals that are not, high enough grade to be mined, you're misrepresenting the story, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of the smearing is to try and make something look bigger than it is, and there's really no residual grade left after you calculate out the high grade. In your
Yeah.
case, with a residual grade, that's something you can open pit mine. That makes a big difference in why you would want to represent that as a 100 meters of, what did you say again?
Just about 8%.
8%. Yeah. So, and where was the high grade in that 100 meters? Like, was it in the middle, in the top, bottom?
It's at the bottom, but it's, if you think about the cross section, it's like the hole kind of came down like this, and the high grades, where's my hand, angled like this. So we think the high grade comes to surface. We haven't tested that yet, because it is like sort of a near vertical sort of breccia structure that traces a fault there. So we have hit it above and below that intersection, right? So never quite as high grade as that one, but we think it comes up for sure. We definitely know.
Have you gone deeper and tagged that breccia zone?
Yep. Yeah. And laterally and stuff like that. And we do see elsewhere, because it's not like always super continuous. Like it's not like a nice predictable pipe, at least that we can tell, right? If it is, we don't know the orientation of it yet, right? So that was the interesting thing about boundary zone, where, because Tom and Jason are classic SEDEX. Now that term is kind of defunct now, so you might call it shale hosted base metal deposit. So they're in the stratiform. They're very laterally predictable. You're out of the zone until you're immediately into the zone. It's like a 1 centimeter transition from no grade to grade. And then you're in the zone all the way through until, again, similar transition immediately out, right? Whereas boundary zone's not at all like that. So it's like these veins and veinlets and matrix replacement and breccias and just not nearly as predictable, right? So that was part of what we kind of saw as maybe an opportunity there, because of the heterogeneity, you can hopefully do some more ore sorting, because you've got real dead bits that have nothing, right? So you might as well toss those out. And no point sending those to the mill, right? So that was the original reason we put holes in, was because of some initial encouraging ore sorting results. We thought like, maybe we can make a go at this at the grades that Kamenko was seeing. But then we got better grades. We're like, okay, so maybe we don't even need the ore sorting, right? We just don't know yet. Like it's a nascent zone. We're working to define it as fast as the markets will allow us to define it, which is to say we're capital constrained. Although I tell you what, a lot of companies are going to be driller constrained as well, because that is a labor shortage that's looming as well. But we want to define this thing. We want to put some engineering on it. We want to get the permitting underway. I don't want to be a perpetual explorer. I just think at some point, every additional discovery adds less value than the one before it.
Well, that's the second reason I wanted to talk to you here today,
Yeah.
Brandon, is that it wasn't just that the high grade. I mean, I'm a high grade junkie, so I love that, especially when you have some promising widths and it's near surface and you could open pit it.
Yeah.
But the bigger question that I wanted to ask, and hoping that you don't, put that engineer and economics hat on just yet, and maybe have some more guts in the exploration side of it, is that you, in this latest release, you started to get some sniffs of sulfides and copper. And I'm starting to wonder, you've got all this widespread mineralization in the stratigraphy, in the layers of the cake, but my bigger question is, where is that all coming from? And is a massive sulfide source a possibility?
Well, we do see massive sulfides at Boundary West, and those grade from like almost pure pyrite. Like, so the massive sulfide is just really pyrite with minor sphalerite, and then they grade to much more sphalerite where the grades are much better. We hit that in this hole where that was the 8% zinc over 61 meters, right? Like, and then we are starting to see in that zone, clearly we're vectoring towards a core or a feeder system, right? And so the copper we're seeing, I would describe currently as geochemically anomalous, so up to 0.1%. You wouldn't run a copper circuit for that. You'd spend more money trying to recover it than you would get value out of it. But it is kind of begging the question, because you do in these style of systems, you can kind of get to a hotter zone where you might see some copper, you might see some gold, right? And what we understand now about these styles of systems is that VMS and SEDEX and all that sort of stuff, it's a continuum. It's like, it's not a discrete category. So
well, that, knowing what I do about VMS deposits and zonation of grade, this is why I'm kind of getting pretty excited, is because, we know that, oftentimes with the zonation of grade in a VMS system is that you get zinc and silver up top, and then you go deeper and you get copper gold. And so if you are seeing the extent of that VMS system, and you've got all this zinc and all over the place, it begs the question, well, where's it all coming from? And could you have a more copper rich zone as you get deeper?
we don't know. And I don't want to promote this as a copper exploration story, because we just don't know yet, right? Like right now we're using that copper as a vector towards the hotter parts and the feeder proximal. And typically what we've seen in our systems is that in distal, you're a pretty pure zinc, deposit. Then as you get hotter, you're adding lead and silver. So the highest grade parts of some of our systems are quite lead and silver dominated, right? We see, in Jason South, which is the closest we have to a preserved feeder system, and it is a preserved feeder system in places. You can see up to, I think the highest ever result was 1,000 grams per ton silver in an interval, right? Like you get very high grades there. But never economic copper. Now, as we get deeper in the system, because clearly what we're seeing, and you talked about the layer cake, we've found so many of these horizons, and we don't know if they're all formed at the same time. We don't have a real.
Are you doing any age dating?
We age date the host rocks, but the mineralization we haven't yet age dated, and we are going to look at some of that, particularly on the pyrite, because you can age date pyrite sometimes. The other sulfides not necessarily, and the volcanics we could age date, but we're not sure if the mineralization is occurring at the same time as the volcanic. So a volcanic age date may not, it helps constrain things, but it doesn't necessarily tell us when the mineralization event occurred. But point is that we may not be at the deepest part of the system. The deepest part of the system may be hotter, but it may not be producing a lot of mineralization. So, are the minerals actually precipitating there yet? We don't know.
But it could.
Yeah, it could. And look, the key thing is that when we bought this project, there was the understanding that Tom and Jason were the same horizon, and that was the only horizon that mattered. That was what everyone knew about this district. Now we know Tom and Jason are not the same horizon, and that boundary zone sits below them, and that boundary west sits below that, and that this, the lower sequence, which we've discovered last year, sits even below that. And then with, so there's like within boundary west, there's at least 2 stratiform sequences. And then these volcanics seem to be extremely favorable to replacement and mineralized formation there. So that's a couple potential horizons as well. So we've got 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 potential mineralized horizons. Now, locally, they might be barren, they might be mineralized, but the search area for what's prospective is wide open, wide open. So there's just so much potential here, such a big, long-lived, fluid flux here that's, churning out these deposits.
To me, with all that widespread mineralization, it's indicative of a big plumbing system.
Oh yeah, well, it's a crustal structure, right? This is a fault that probably was through the entire crust, basically, like a big basin bounding fault that's generating these fluid circuits that are scavenging metals in one place and depositing them in these deposits. And where we see these deposits forming is where you've got the big basin bounding fault intersecting second order structures. That's why you see a certain kind of pseudo periodicity to it. And that's, so we consider structure to be a major vector as well to where we should be looking. And so
And what is the grade as you go closer to that structure? Are you seeing a difference in the grade, or is it?
Well, that's exactly what I was, talking about. It's like distal from the structure, it's quite zinc dominated. And then as you get closer to the structure, the lead and silver picks up. And then right at the structure, that's where you get the real breccias, very high grade zinc, lead, silver mineralization, and anomalous, but so far economically unimportant copper mineralization, right? So there's just so much exploration left to do here. And like, we don't want to spend our life exploring, because at some point it's like, well, why don't we explore after we build it? We can do that too, right? Particularly if you're having to drill really deep and it's getting expensive, it's like, that's gonna be later in my life anyways.
Well,
right?
I can tell you one reason, there's not a lot of copper discoveries out there these days. And with the electrification of everything, copper is quite exciting if you can show that you've got something there. And everything you're describing to me, the brecciation, the way the grades are distributed, is suggestive to me, and going towards the fault is suggestive to me that, there could be something really big there as a feeder zone. And I know you're being cautious, and I don't want to change your focus of exploration. But you know, that feeder target is quite exciting to me, the potential of that. And I understand that you say, well, it may not be that mineralized, but where in the world have you seen a situation where you've got such widespread mineralization and you come towards a feeder and it's not that mineralized?
Well, it should be, the challenge is that, like, if you kind of think about it coming up the feeder and then spreading out, it might only be kind of going one direction. But
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
yeah, the challenge is that your feeder might be quite narrow. It might be very high grade, but it's like hitting it could be very difficult, particularly if it's deep, right? And so once it sort of branches out into the basin and forms these stratabound deposits, those are easier to explore for, and they're easier to hit, and there's lots of tonnage, right? So it's an easy target, right? And be frank, our exploration costs, our per meter costs are very high here. We're drilling through shales, which are very tough drilling, very slow drilling. We get 40 meters a day, maybe. That's not 40 meters a shift, that's a day, right? So to drill a deep
Yeah,
hole.
plugging a 600 or 700 meter hole is going to take you some time.
We did a 700-meter hole trying to hit Jason South in 2018. Got stuck in a fault and deviated, and we missed the target. It was because of the fault, it was constantly like struggling with that hole. So that was a 700-meter hole that cost us $750,000, and we didn't hit anything with it, right? Like, so you can understand when I can crank out 300-meter holes in better terrain, I know I'm going to hit stuff, and I can do those for like 100 grand each or whatever, right? Like that's where my focus is, right? We definitely, like, we've got so many super interesting deep targets that it's just like we're just not there. We're not ready for it yet, right? I mean, but look, what an opportunity, what a project, Dave, because we have, like the deeper parts of Tom, we have an intersection outside the resource that's 14 meters of 14% zinc. It's 900 meters down. We're not going to drill it. Like it's there. When we build the thing, we'll follow up on it. But like most juniors would, like be ecstatic to have an intersection like that. And to us, it's like man, like we don't really have time to deal with that, right? So
before I let you go, I know your time constraint here. How many holes have you done near that fault where you have all this brecciation, and how deep?
Let me see. Let me just take a look at my presentation. I think we've done about 5 or 6 right now.
Are they pending or are they been announced?
I don't know if we did a hole into that fault this year because we did want to step out from it, right? Okay. Now let's see. So like, where we hit the 6.4 meters of 43.5%, the year after we hit 5.8 meters of almost 26%. So it's like there's and that was,
it's getting hotter the closer you get.
Yeah, and that was a good 50 meters, 60 meters away or something, right? So there's a bit of continuity there, right? And
a bit.
Yeah, it's like, look, that this project's so big, right? Like when I think of a lot of continuity, I think about like 500 meters of continuity. That for a lot of our deposits.
Yeah, but you haven't done that drilling yet, too.
No. But we have there's lateral step outs where we don't seem to be hitting it, but I mean, like, I don't think this thing is a solid sheet, right? So it's like it's gonna be coming and going, right? So we're gonna need some tight drill spacing to define it, which is something that we have to give some thought to, because when we inevitably do a resource on this, if you don't have a good sense of continuity of those high grade zones, any good resource geologist is going to put a top cut that's going to eliminate a lot of the impact.
Exactly.
Right? So, which is totally fair, but it makes us realize that we want to try to model these, and we want to be able to have enough drill holes into them and a sensible thesis we can put to the resource geologist to say it's discrete, this is where it is, this is how the grade goes, model that separately, right? And even if it's only 200,000 tons, right? But it's 200,000 tons at
High grade.
a very high grade. Well, that's awesome, right? So that makes a difference, right? So there's a lot to think about. It's an opportunity, but it's also like a challenge, right? Because it's not so easy to drill off.
Well, I'm going to let you go here pretty soon, Brandon, but one thing that I really appreciate about you and your team is that you guys do good work. And secondly, I was recently, I can't remember which conference it was, but you were speaking with somebody, and you spoke about how this has evolved. Excuse me. And the sense that I got is that you guys are very open-minded about how it's evolved, the theory, the modeling and all that. And I think that's really important. And I just wanted to commend you on that.
Yeah, you know what? My most important job is bringing in a team that I can trust and that I let do their thing, right? And we have a joke in the company that we have 6 geologists and I'm the 6th best. That's, if we hire 2 more, I'm going to be the 8th best, because I should not be hiring people as geologists who are worse than the CEO, who is not a particularly good geologist, right? So
you're being modest there.
I'm not, right, because you think about it, prior to this, it's like management of juniors, investment banking. Like I spent 5 years as a programmer between some of this and my geology degree. I pick things up from my geos and I benefit that I can remember what they say and I can repeat that here. But they're the smart ones. Our geological team are very,
Well, you're no slouch either. I think you went to what university?
Well, I went to UBC for my undergrad, then Oxford for the MBA. But I mean, there's no geology in an MBA, buddy, right? So
Yeah, but they don't let just schmoes in there either.
no.
So
Yeah.
So don't be too modest, Brandon. I've been around you long enough to know you're a pretty bright guy.
Thanks a lot, man.
Okay, let me close it off. And if you have to go, you have to go. Otherwise, you can listen in. So there you go, folks. Not a lot of great zinc plays out there. And I completely understand why you would want to keep the focus of the company on what's easy to get at, because that would be the starting of any mine. But being the kind of guy I am as an explorationist, and being really excited about zinc and copper as well, and seeing the way this big system, that plumbing system of the whole thing excites me as well. But nonetheless, having a focus on what you can easily get at and could be the starter of a mine that then would pay you to go deeper makes all the sense in the world. But I'm a high grade junkie and a copper junkie, and I can't can't stop from being interested in about that. But they got a lot of high grade, and it looks like the economics have a good chance. So these kind of stories aren't easy to find. Brandon and his team have one. They've also had lots of success raising money, doing good work. The valuation is very reasonable. I suggest you do your homework, check out their website, speak with your financial advisors before making any investment decisions. This show is for information purposes only, but in Fireweed Zinc, I think they have something very special. I don't think it's completely being appreciated in the valuation of the company. So check them out, and we'll speak to you later. Thank you very much for joining us.